I took a job as an overnight security guard at an old library. The night shift is getting weird. I know what you're thinking. A security guard job? At a library? Sounds like the easiest gig in the world. And for the first couple of weeks, it was. The job posting said they needed someone to maintain the integrity of the collection. I took it as a joke, but it turns out the old Franklin Library is just so big. They want someone on staff at all times in case of a fire, a flood, or maybe a rogue librarian with a grudge. I'm a college student, and the graveyard shift from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. is perfect for me. The pay is decent, the Wi-Fi is strong, and I have 8 hours of uninterrupted quiet to study. I brought a textbook, a laptop, and a thermos of coffee, ready to settle in for my new life of quiet productivity. The library itself is a magnificent, Gothic-looking building. Carved stone gargoyles leer down from the ledges, and the interior is a maze of dark mahogany bookshelves stretching 3 stories high. Every creak and groan sounds amplified in the stillness of the night. At first, it was just the normal sounds of an old building settling. The radiator hissing, the wind whistling through a drafty window. Then, things started to get a little specific. It started with the books. One night, I was on my routine patrol, walking the long, silent corridors of the fiction section. Everything was in order, spine out, neatly shelved. I turned a corner, and when I looked back, a single book lay on the carpet, face down. Moby Dick. I picked it up, placed it back on the shelf, and thought nothing of it. It must have been a fluke, or maybe a librarian had left it out. The next night, it was different. I found a book on the floor again, this time in the nonfiction section. A History of the American Civil War. I put it back and continued my rounds, feeling a slight chill. The night after that, it wasn't one book, but a small stack of them, arranged in a semicircle on a reading table. They were all about astronomy. The Red Planet, a guide to the stars, planetary motion. I mentioned it to the head librarian, a kind older man named Mr. Abernathy. He just chuckled. "Oh, the ghosts of our past readers," he said with a wink. "They just want to finish their stories." I tried to laugh it off, but the feeling of being watched intensified. One night, I was sitting at the front desk, the only light in the cavernous building coming from my desk lamp. I heard a faint sound from the second floor. A whisper. It was almost inaudible, but it was there. I turned off my music and held my breath. The whisper came again, a rustling, papery sound, followed by a soft, sibilant sigh. It sounded like someone was turning pages. I told myself it was just my imagination. A pipe, a draft, anything but what I knew it was. But the next time I heard it, it wasn't a whisper. It was the sound of a voice, a hollow, dry voice, reading aloud. I crept up the main staircase, my flashlight beam cutting a shaky path through the darkness. The voice seemed to be coming from the history wing, a place filled with dusty tomes and forgotten records. I reached the section and listened. The voice was reading a passage from a book about the French Revolution. I could make out the words. The guillotine descended with a sickening thud. I froze. No one else was here. I was alone. The reading stopped. The quiet returned, heavier and more menacing than before. Then, with a soft thud, a book dropped. I shone my flashlight down the aisle. It was a book on linguistics, lying open on the floor. The final straw came tonight. I found a new section of books that I'd never noticed before. It was hidden behind a false panel in the wall, tucked away in a dusty corner of the 3rd floor. There was no sign, no label, just a collection of old leather-bound journals and notebooks. I pulled one off the shelf, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a diary, handwritten in looping script. The first entry was dated 1923. I read the first few lines, my flashlight illuminating the yellowed pages. I have found the secret of the library. They don't read the books, they become them. And the collection is always hungry for new stories. Just then, I heard a sound behind me. Not a whisper, not a rustle of pages. It was the sound of a book spine snapping, followed by a low, contented hum. I turned my head slowly, my flashlight beam shaking. At the end of the aisle stood a figure. It was humanoid in shape, but composed entirely of pages, their edges curling and fluttering in a breeze that didn't exist. Its head was a tangled mass of parchment, and its eyes were 2 empty holes where the text had been consumed. It wasn't looking at me, but at the open diary in my hand. Then, its gaze shifted, and it started to hum again, but this time, I could make out the words in the hum, and they were the words on my name tag. It was my story it was trying to read, and it was getting hungry.